Chapter 27. Sharmelle awoke to "Great is thy faithfulness" at 5:31, and this time her first morning prayer was, "Hey God, it's me, Sharmelle. Good morning. You never sleep, but your girl is tired." She packed in a hurry because last-minute packing was just her thing. Showered, dressed, and ordered room service. Then she checked out of the hotel and headed for the Detroit Metro Airport. At least that was the plan, until she realized she'd only need to drive 5 miles out of the way to get to Marcus and Angie Pierce's neighborhood. And since she was in a rental, she took the detour. She parked down the street from the Pierce home, far enough away not to be noticed, she hoped, but close enough to catch a glimpse of Marcus if he ventured outside. She was used to stakeouts, so she felt comfortable that she knew what she was doing. She was listening to Katerina, one of her favorite podcasters who had just produced and dropped an 8-part series about women in leadership in Southern churches. Her premise was that women were doing the work in the ministry, including, figuratively, much of the heavy lifting men should be doing. So it was usually the women who stepped up to get the job done. Despite that, Katerina said many Southern churches denied women leadership positions. Sharmelle had thought about this a great deal, now that she was heading up the youth ministry for the high school students. Nobody seemed to have a problem with her being in charge, and they all pitched in to help whenever there was a service project or a major activity there at the church. She was lost in thought on the subject that she almost missed someone walking out of the Pierce home. It couldn't be Angie, too young. But as the person got closer to a car in the driveway, Sharmelle could see the woman was wearing surgical scrub pants and top. Sharmelle was intrigued. Why was a nurse there? Was someone sick? Her mind, of course, went to worst-case scenario. What if she traveled this far, passed up the opportunity to just boldly ring their doorbell and introduce herself, and missed a chance to meet Marcus Pierce, and now he was dead? "Okay, Shar, get a grip," she said to herself. The nurse may not even be there for a patient. She looked young enough to be a Pierce granddaughter visiting her grandparents, or living there while she attends school. Sharmelle decided that was the least troubling option, so she'd go with that. She contemplated following the nurse, but figured there was no point. She waited another half hour with no activity outside the Pierce home, and then resumed her original plan and headed for the Detroit airport. The flight didn't look too crowded, but she was glad she had booked a business class seat anyway, and hoped she was not seated next to someone in a chatty mood that early in the morning. And she wasn't. Her roommate, a 40-something looking man in a navy blue tailored suit, was asleep before the flight attendant ended his safety lesson. She used that time to practice in her mind how she would tell First Lady Hayes that she had indeed found Marcus Pierce. What would come next? She'd probably want to come to Detroit to see him, but given her recent procedure, her doctor would most likely not sign off on that. Would he be willing to come to Pearl City? Pressing questions with no answers right then. The flight landed just as a blanket of fog made it difficult for her to see the runway, but she sure hoped the pilot could. It looked like it might cause some backups, so Sharmelle was glad she booked that early flight after all. Her roommate stirred for the first time since they were wheels up in Detroit. He gathered a large camouflage duffel bag from the overhead bin and stood up, which Sharmelle found amusing since they were in business class and would be deplaning first anyway. She was glad to be back home, or at least close to home, as she made her way to baggage claim. She was looking for Cassius, or perhaps Lyra if Cassius realized how early he would need to make that trip from Pearl City. Neither one of them was in sight, but someone else was. King Lee. "Welcome home," he said, flashing that $1,000,000 smile at her once again. How is it that he got even more handsome in just a few days, she thought. "Hey, I said welcome home." "Oh, sorry, I was thinking about something from my flight." "Guess you weren't expecting to see me." "Well, no, Cassius said he would be picking me up. He called me last night, something about a presentation he had to make that was pushed up to this morning, so he asked if I'd take over for him, for one of his 2 favorite sisters. My favorite brother always got jokes, but seriously, I'm sorry he imposed on you. I'm sure you're plenty busy today." "No problem at all. Plus, this gives me an excuse to stop by Healy's Vegan Donut World on the way back to Pearl City. Just the mention of those donuts made Sharmelle's stomach growl, so she decided she'd wait to be mad at Cassius, since she was sure this was all a setup, and at least she'd have an opportunity to find out details about Etta Hayes' recovery, since King's grandma Gussie and Etta Hayes were close friends. On the 45-minute drive to Healy's, King brought Sharmelle up to speed on Etta Hayes. She truly was a miracle, because when she arrived at Good Sam, doctors told Lucian they were concerned she might need bypass surgery. King said Grandma Gussie was never worried. She had called every member of the church older than 60, the group she called the Seasoned Saints, and they met at First Ave that night for a 2-hour prayer service. Our prayers of faith moved the hand of God, King said his grandma explained when she called him at 5 o'clock in the morning the next day. The doctors told Lucian Etta comes from good stock. The Seasoned Saints said there was something more powerful at play. Sharmelle felt such relief, but she was uneasy too. Uneasy about how this medical situation might affect when and how she would break the news about finding Marcus Pierce. But at least she had a day or so before she would see the First Lady in person. King delivered Sharmelle to her home, carried in her bags, and took a seat on her sofa, but she explained she needed to check in with her parents and pick up Nancy Drew, who was probably feeling abandoned by now. King took the hint and asked if he could see her for dinner tomorrow night, and she said yes. The visit was just as she predicted. Her father welcomed her home with his famous engulfing hug and asked whether she had a chance to visit one of his favorite Detroit landmarks, the Motown Museum. Her mom was still fishing for hints about the case that took her to Detroit in the first place. And Nancy Drew was being Nancy Drew, pretending she didn't even recognize her beloved owner and not concerned about leaving camp grandparents for her own home. Once she was settled in back at home, Sharmelle made her work-to-do list for the next day. First up, the morning meeting with Jacqueline for updates on ongoing cases and sharing the pertinent details from Detroit. She called W2 to let her know she was back and to tell her about her upcoming date with King, and she called it a date. And as usual, W2 talked about how this relationship was meant to be and everything Sharmelle needed to do to help God's plan along. Sharmelle was about to tell W2 to calm down and snap back to reality when she saw she had a text. A text from Lucian Hayes. Hey Sharmelle, hope you're doing well. Mom keeps asking for you, saying she wants to see you. She needs to get some rest, but she'll probably be up for a visit tomorrow. I'm sure she does want to see me, Sharmelle thought. I have news for her that affects you as well, Lucian Hayes, and you have no idea. And now I have to decide when and exactly what to tell her.